Hello and welcome. You're watching Newsline Live with me, Neha Khanna, and joining me today is a very special guest, Jacinta Allan, Premier of the State of Victoria in Australia. And she's also the longest serving female minister in Victorian state history. Premier, welcome to News9 and welcome to India.
Thank you so much, Neha. It's wonderful to join you.
Thank you so much for your time. Let me begin by asking you this question. This is your first visit to India as Premier of Victoria. Firstly, what's on your agenda? And in your assessment, what's changed between your last visit to India 15 years ago and now?
So I've had the opportunity to travel to India in 2009, and coming back 15 years later, I've had the opportunity to see just how much India is focused on the rest of the world, how that outward global focus and the huge amount of work that's gone on within India to support education opportunities, the growth of business. The growth of business in India is remarkable. Significant multinational global companies that are based here in India but have a footprint around the world. And that's presented a really important opportunity coming back in this visit as Premier to engage with those businesses, to talk about the further opportunities there are to invest in Victoria and particularly in Melbourne. And certainly when you look at the future of the globe, that future of the world is very much going to be driven by India's role. And I see in terms of Australia's future, our state of Victoria is very much the future of our nation as well.
That's heartening to hear, Premier. So let me ask you this. There is no doubt that India and Australia share very strong economic, educational, cultural and people-to-people ties. In your view, what kind of a role is Victoria playing in contributing to this aspect of the bilateral relationship? I read somewhere 1 in every 20 Victorians is of Indian heritage. Is that correct?
It's so true. And Neha, you're absolutely right in terms of the relationship has never been stronger. And that plus the fact that we are home in Victoria to the largest number of Indian-born Australians have chosen Melbourne and Victoria as their home. And so it's that strong foundation, those strong cultural ties, economic ties that have given me this incredibly important foundation to build even further. And we also have what underpins that relationship is a shared set of values, focused on families, focused on education, focused on working hard, and also making a contribution to your community. They're values we both share. And that also too has provided the opportunity to open up more conversations about how we can welcome jobs and opportunities in Victoria, but also too to support economic opportunities, education opportunities here in India.
You know, I want to dwell on both those aspects, the education opportunities and the employment opportunities. Let's start with education, which is a very important component of the India-Australia relationship. Victoria is known as the education state. It is home to 8 public universities and capital Melbourne has been ranked as Australia's best student city. How significant a role is Victoria, in your view, playing to bolstering this aspect of the relationship between the two countries?
Education is at the centre of the relationship, and you've identified we do have world-class education institutions, but also too those universities and TAFE institutes have deep connections here in India. For example, Deakin University, one of our great Victorian University, has had a presence here in India for 30 years. It was a world leader in terms of universities coming and establish a presence and a relationship. And many more universities...
And it's the first foreign university to set up its campus in India, in Gujarat to be precise.
Yes, and it's that's really led the way for other Victorian universities to come and also establish a presence. We opened the University of Melbourne's, Australia's top-ranked university, the University of Melbourne. We opened this week and celebrated the opening of their global centre here in the heart of Delhi. Also too, we're seeing great partnerships being forged. A great partnership, an example of that is between the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology and BITS Pilani, who are offering a joint degree in civil engineering, a PhD opportunities. Students study in India for two years They study in Melbourne for 2 years and they come out with 2 degrees that they can put on their wall. And that comes about as a lot of hard work, and it comes about too as a result of those really direct people-to-people relationships that is providing education opportunities for students on both sides of the relationship.
Premier, there's one challenge that I want you to address. There's a problem that Indian students are currently facing in its attempt to curb immigration. Australia seems to have made it a lot tougher for international students to get student visas. The visa fee, for instance, has more than doubled since the 1st of July. It's gone up to 1,600 Australian dollars from 700 Australian dollars. The amount of savings that international students need to get an Australian visa has been raised from $24,500 to $29,700. And this was the second increase that was announced in the month of May in 7 months. My question to you is that this is going to adversely impact Indian students for whom Australia ranks amongst the top 5 higher education destinations. Do you not believe that this move by the Australian government will force Indian students to look elsewhere and also in the process adversely impact the Australian economy and the Victorian economy? Because at the end of the day, international education is one of Australia's largest export industries.
It is, and Neha, I want to take this opportunity to say very, very clearly to the broader Indian community that Victoria and Melbourne remains an absolutely welcoming place for Indian international students. We are not only the #1 destination for international students studying in Australia, we're the #1 destination for Indian students choosing to study in Australia, and we not only want to keep it that way in the face of some of those changes that have been made by the national government, and I really do understand the concerns that you've raised. The role that we are playing as a state government is to continue to emphasise very strongly with words and actions. We want to continue to encourage international students to feel welcomed in Victoria, but we're also taking some practical steps on how we can continue to support the work. I've mentioned the university partnerships. We have a great opportunity in the delivery of transnational education to do more partnerships with Indian universities and institutes here in India. And not only is that a great relationship, a great opportunity for shared study and learning, together Indian universities and institutes, Melbourne and Victorian universities and institutes are producing global citizens with a new superpower, which is cultural intelligence. And I announced a fund this week, a $5 million fund called Yes to International Students, that's going to support more of that delivery of transnational education by Victorian institutes here in India, and that will continue to drive that focus on international education that we know is so important to the Indian community. It's important to me as well, and that is why we've announced that really practical way that we at a state level can continue to support students here in India who want to study at one of our universities.
You're doing your bit to support Indian students who want to study in Victoria. We have an Australian university that has established its campus here in India. Do you think going forward, perhaps a leading Indian institute could set up its campus one day in Victoria, maybe an IIT or an IIM?
Well, we would absolutely welcome the opportunity to have more of the Indian education opportunities coming to Victoria. And when you think about the areas of the economy that are important to India, the Indian government, to business representatives that I've met with over the week, advanced manufacturing, renewable energy, we've mentioned education, delivery of healthcare services, a whole range of focus on technology and particularly in medtech and biotech. These are also our priority areas, and I released while I was here our new India strategy called Our Share Future, which identifies these opportunities, and we'd absolutely welcome the opportunity to continue to look at new ways that we can support education delivery, business investment in Melbourne and Victoria.
Well, since education is directly linked to employment, let me ask you this question. What kind of work opportunities is the state of Victoria offering to young Indian professionals, and are most of these in the software engineering and tech sector and the startup ecosystem, or are there opportunities elsewhere too?
Look, those startup opportunities, the tech opportunities are huge in Victoria, and we have a real focus in those areas, as I know is a focus for India as well. But this is another announcement I made during my visit here in India, where we've announced that for the visas, the skilled migration visas that we support as a state government within our national system, we're allocating a quarter of those places to international students who've studied at a Victorian university at TAFE and want to stay on and bring their skills and talents and abilities into regional parts of Victoria. Again, another really practical way that we can support those international students with great skills and degrees to come and live and work in one of our great parts of Victoria.
Okay. Let's talk about economic ties. Now we know that India and Australia are strategic partners. A free trade agreement titled the Australia-India Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement came into force 2 years ago in 2022. Victoria is known as Australia's gateway to the world, and you just referred to this, Premier, that in 2018 you launched Victoria's India strategy, Our Shared Future. So if you could elaborate on this, what is Victoria's India strategy and what measures is the government taking to further bolster trade and investment ties between the two countries?
So when I was a minister in the Victorian government 15 years ago and had my first visit here to India, I wrote to the then Premier and said we should have a strategy. Victoria needs to have a strategy that's focused on India, focused on the partnership, focused on the opportunity. And we've had one in place, but we needed to refresh it because, as we know, Neha, the world has changed dramatically in the last few years, and certainly India's focus and place and importance in the world has been so substantially enhanced in recent years. So, and I mentioned earlier, we have such a wonderful Indian diaspora in Melbourne and Victoria. They are the, if you like, the beating heart of this strategy because they provide the foundation on which we can forge stronger ties. So we've identified key areas that again have been informed by my conversations, discussions with the Indian community living in Melbourne and Victoria, who are working in a whole range of different areas, informed by business and government conversations here as well. And so we have focused on education, on tech areas, on renewable energy, but also too on some areas that we can build on our cultural strengths in film and in sport particularly. We share a love of the film industry, where the movies, Bollywood movies, so many are filmed in Melbourne, which we're so proud of. We also too we are the sporting capital of the country in Melbourne, and that also too presents us with further opportunities like the one we announced this week in bringing a kabaddi match to Melbourne.
That sounds fabulous. And, since you mentioned the Indian diaspora, that's the perfect cue for me to ask you the next question. Australia is a melting pot, as we know. Victoria has a very vibrant multicultural community. How do you see the role of the Indian diaspora in your state? And what kind of measures is the government of Victoria taking to, let's say, make the members of the Indian diaspora feel more welcome, apart from, of course, the education opportunities that we've talked about?
Victoria wouldn't be the state it is today without the contribution of the Indian diaspora to our community. Families who've come, raising kids, part of our local communities, make such a big contribution to so many community organisations working in a whole range of different professions and business, running their own businesses, employing people. We wouldn't be the state we are today without that contribution from the Indian diaspora. But the other really big contribution the Indian diaspora has made to Melbourne and Victoria is the way it has come and shared Indian culture with our community in such a warm, generous way. And that has been a way that we've been able to forge even stronger ties like the ones we've built on over the course of this week. And it just means that our already strong multicultural state is made even stronger because of the vibrancy of the Indian diaspora.
Again, glad to hear that. Since we're talking about trade and investment ties and people-to-people ties, connectivity is always important. Now, I know that there are at least 3 direct flights that currently exist between Melbourne and Mumbai and Melbourne and Delhi, operated by Air India and Qantas. But do you think we could do better on that front? Do we need better air connectivity?
Well, I'm pleased to share with you that we have daily flights between Delhi and Melbourne, thanks to the work of Air India. And then there's also the flights in and out of Mumbai as well. And I met earlier this week with Air India, and we spoke about our shared aspiration to increase the number of flights. Air India has made a significant purchase of new aircraft, and they're looking, as that aircraft comes on board, as to where in the world they can connect those additional flights to. And I've said really clearly that we'd love those flights to come to Melbourne, because again, it speaks to that ongoing growth, that growth in the movement of people for business reasons, for visiting family and friends, but also too in tourism as well. We are the cultural and sporting capital in Melbourne of Australia. There are many, many good reasons, Neha, to come and visit Melbourne. If we are the only city in the world to have both a Grand Slam and a Grand Prix that's hosted in our city, and that's just one of so many events. Of course, we've got a big cricket match coming up with the Indian team touring Australia for this, our summer of cricket. We've got so much in terms of the movement of people that we want to see. The key to unlocking more of that is through more of those direct flights.
Certainly, and I can tell you that we're all really looking forward to the Border Gavaskar Trophy. It's going to be exciting, and of course, we hope to win the trophy as well.
I'll let that one slide through to the keeper.
Well left. As you just mentioned, Premier, Melbourne, the capital of Victoria, is not just an educational hub. It hosts some of the most popular sporting, cultural, arts events that are held in Australia. Now, the Melbourne Film Festival is one big event that seems to be very popular with Bollywood stars. Every year we see a whole galaxy of stars from Bollywood and other parts of Indian cinema descend on Melbourne for that. So I'd like to know, how big a role has Indian cinema, and Bollywood in particular, played in bringing the people of the two countries closer, and has it had a great impact, especially in Victoria?
It's been significant. It's been significant. The Melbourne Indian Film Festival is an absolute highlight on our cultural calendar, because it's also important because it gives the Indian community in Australia the chance to tell their story to all of us. And by telling that story to a wider audience, to everyone, to Indian-born Australians, but also the broader Australian community, we just increase that shared understanding and knowledge of culture and tradition and difference. And through that, it continues to be a real strength of our multicultural community in Melbourne and Victoria.
Well, clearly the language barrier has been broken.
Absolutely.
Movies.
And movies are a great way of telling a story. Telling a story, but also giving us the opportunity to pause and reflect on what that story means for us today, and a sharing of culture. And then there are so many of the Bollywood films that are filmed in Melbourne as well, which is just so fabulous. And certainly it brings more than a touch of glamour and excitement when we have Bollywood films being filmed around Melbourne.
Absolutely. We've talked about what Victoria is doing for students or for members of the Indian diaspora, but anything you'd like to say to someone who's watching this interview who's never been to Australia and Victoria in particular and is wondering whether they should be planning their next holiday there? What would you say to them?
We would love you to come to Melbourne and Victoria. It doesn't matter whether you're a lover of sport or food or culture or art or film or the great beautiful outdoors. Melbourne and Victoria has something to offer every Indian thinking of travelling to Melbourne and Australia. And what you'll also find there is a warm embrace from the Victorian community, who we love welcoming visitors. We have something for everyone, and we'd love to welcome more Indian visitors to our beautiful city and state.
Well, as somebody who's been to your beautiful country and Melbourne in particular, I can vouch for that. It certainly offers something to everyone. Let me ask you this, Premier. How do you think India-Australia ties and Victoria-India ties can be further strengthened? I'm sure there are areas of untapped potential that we need to leverage? What are those according to you?
No, you're absolutely right, and that's what we've outlined in our new India strategy, our new ways that we want to focus. We've talked a little bit already about film and culture. That's an area. Not only does supporting those cultural industries, those creative industries, support a sharing of culture, there's a lot of job and economic opportunities in those sectors as well. That is an absolute area of growth and priority. Also too, renewable energy. Renewable energy is just so important in terms of the future of our communities. Our future relies on us delivering more renewable energy. And this is an area where we've identified that we've got a lot that we can learn from India in terms of its drive towards increasing renewable energy as part of the energy mix. We have a big focus on it as well. And I know this is also an example of those shared priorities that we can build on.
Premier, as we conclude this conversation, may I ask you a final question on a personal note? Being a woman politician, as we know, has plenty of challenges and pitfalls anywhere in the world, from the United States to India and Australia. The proverbial glass ceiling, we know, continues to be a reality, though many women have smashed it. And then there is the problem of mindsets, a deeply entrenched sexism and patriarchy, and in some cases downright misogyny. Now, we all recall how, in very dramatic circumstances, back in 2012, the then Australian Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, launched a scathing attack on the then opposition leader, Tony Abbott, in Parliament, accusing him of sexism and misogyny. Therefore, I want to ask you, you are, after all, the longest serving female minister in Victoria. As a woman politician, what has your own journey been like?
Look, I've had the opportunity to be mentored and supported by other women. Julia Gillard is a friend of mine, and I've had the opportunity to have her support on my journey. But what I'm really excited about for the future is the young women I talk to and see who are demanding the seat at the table, who are seeing women of older generations who have coming to these roles in fewer number than we'd like, but are now seeing that there's a space and a role for them, and they are demanding that no matter what decision-making table it might be, it could be in business, in government, in organisations, women should be at every single decision-making table. And I have such optimism for the future because of the way young women are approaching leadership roles, that they see that there's a place for them. They've learnt from some of us older women who've been on the journey, and also too that a lot has changed. A lot has changed. We've got to keep driving that change though, driving that opportunity. I spoke to the Indian Australian Women Leadership Forum yesterday, and that's a great group of women in business, women in emerging leadership roles. We've still got to identify the barriers and knock down those barriers that are stopping women from progressing. But again, that is being driven by younger women who want to be part of that ongoing change for the future.
In fact, it's great that you talk about India-Australia, women associations. I think it's a great idea perhaps for women leaders to travel more often to Victoria and vice versa.
Absolutely.
That would be a good start.
It would be. It would be wonderful.
On that note, Premier Jacinta Allan, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.